Welcome to the Atlanta Men's Workshop speaker and workshop recordings. Atlanta Men's Workshop is held every spring and fall at the Rock Eagle 4-H campus in Eatonton, Georgia. That's just about an hour east of Atlanta, Georgia. Please visit our website at atlantamensworkshop.com or see the link below to find dates and details to join us. Partial scholarships are available to those in need. We hope you enjoy this presentation, and we hope you will come join us at the Rock. Until then, we shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then.
Hey everybody, I'm John Shires. I'm an alcoholic. Ooh, them lights are bright. Man, that is a good-looking bunch of alcoholics and junkies out there. I'm really glad to be here. Thank you so much for that warm introduction. Thank you everyone who's put this together, the committee and the cooks and all that it takes. I've been on committees. I know the alcoholic chaos of trying to herd a bunch of alcoholic cats and get things done. But this thing has come off, and I've been here many times before, but it's been a long time, and I'm glad to be back. My sobriety date is March 7th, 1989. My home group is the Fifth Tradition group of Alcoholics Anonymous. We have a closed Big Book study on Thursday nights in Chamblee and an open speaker meeting on Saturday nights in Chamblee. And we'd love to have you come by anytime. It's real important to me, the home group, the idea of a home group, that I take special efforts and pains to show up at the business meeting, to make sure that I sit in on the little subcommittee meetings that we might have, to try to have my 2 cents on a group conscience of a purposeful, unified Three Legacies group of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's just dedicated to carrying the message and keeping the life-saving message of Alcoholics Anonymous at the forefront of everything we do. And that's been super important for me. It wasn't always, and I'm going to talk about that. Another important thing I want you all to know is I have a sponsor. My sponsor actually has less time than me. I'm getting a little buzz here. Can y'all hear me okay? Okay, good. I'll talk loud. I can talk loud, so you don't have to amplify it too much. I have a sponsor today. Like I said, my sponsor has less time than me, which the longer you stick around, the less important that really is. It's the quality of someone's approach to this deal. And my sponsor has an amazing quality approach to this deal, and he's dedicated to it. That's the kind of man I need in my life. My sponsor knows that he is my sponsor, and I want to make that point. You know why we're laughing at that? Because most of us have had the experience of coming in here and getting a sponsor, but that sponsor didn't know that he was my sponsor, and I had that experience. I did not get well as a result. I do not recommend it, but sponsorship is very important to me. I would not be alive or sober or have the amazing life that I'm going to tell you about today if I didn't have good sponsors. And my life has been saved over and over by good sponsorship. So I'm just going to do exactly what the Big Book tells me to do in this deal. There's 2 instructions on what we do when we tell our stories in Alcoholics Anonymous. One is, and it's the more common one that we hear, is I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I used to be like and what happened to me and what I'm like now as a result of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the other one, which is I think less that we hear less about, is it says each speaker tells their story of how they formed and made an approach to and a connection to God. You know, and for those people who are new here, and I know there's a lot, and are still touchy on the God subject, understand that God, the term God, is a placeholder term in Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, and I was so touchy about religious and spiritual matters when I came in, I couldn't even say the word God. I said higher power for probably my first 3 or 4 years in Alcoholics Anonymous. And then my character defect of laziness got the better of me, and God's only 1 syllable and higher power is 4. So I finally just went with God. But understand that it's a placeholder word for all that we do and don't understand about spiritual matters. And the beauty of Alcoholics Anonymous, I don't have to understand a damn thing about God or spiritual matters to make use of them. You know, and I worked the entire 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous with almost no conception of a higher power at all. And they work just fine. And as a matter of fact, at 34 years sober, I think I have less of a really well-formed connection than I've ever had. And it still just works really, really well. So anyway, my story is this. I come from a big alcoholic family. I have 7 brothers and sisters. On my dad's side, there's tons of alcoholism. On my mom's side, there's tons of alcoholism and insanity. On both of my parents' side, there's a bunch of really highly successful people too. It's funny how they're mixed together, and sometimes the highly successful people took huge falls, and sometimes they didn't, but it's a weird dynamic. I was raised by college-educated people to go to college, to go out in the world and perform, and I was terrified at that prospect from 8 years old. From 8 years old, when I realized that it was expected of me to go to some big university and take classes and write papers and do things and blah, blah, blah. I was terrified of that. I would not have been able to put it in those terms at the time, but I just knew I couldn't do that. I couldn't do a book report over the summer. Y'all have summer book reports? You're supposed to read 3 books. I would just be in terror at the beginning of the summer. I knew I wasn't going to be able to read these 3 books. And they would sit on my nightstand, and I would look at them every night before I went to bed and think, I need to start reading those. They're going to want to report on those. And I would just be paralyzed with fear. I can't read, and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, as I'm going to talk about a lot, fear, 1/3 of our inventory process, turns out to be a huge, huge driver of all my decision-making in my life, as far back as I care to look. But like I said, the truth is I come from a big, loving, upper-middle-class family. And I had 7 brothers and sisters. Just about half of us are alcoholics at any given time. My old man is what the big book would call a hard drinker. Both my parents were what the big book would call a hard drinker. That both my parents drank. I never saw an adult growing up. I grew up in the 70s. I never saw an adult growing up that didn't have a cocktail in one hand and a cigarette in the other. Right? My parents threw a lot of parties. My old man was a physician. My mother was a nurse. They threw parties. They had get-togethers. They had the neighborhood people over. Our house was that house. All the kids played at my house, and all the adults played at my house. And my parents were just fun-loving people. And it looked fun to me. It always looked fun and glamorous and exciting. It was drinking out of crystal glasses, and smoking. The 70s, everybody smoked everywhere. You smoked in church in the 70s. And, you might in the vestibule, but anyway, as several people in our little cabin meeting that we had, our little cabin meeting before the meeting tonight, several people said this, which I hear a lot amongst alcoholics, is they never fit anywhere. And I never fit anywhere. I didn't feel like I fit in my family. I'm talking today with the hindsight of having worked the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, okay? I see that I was raised in a loving, beautiful family. They were crazy now, don't get me wrong, but everybody's crazy. As far as I can tell, the whole world's crazy anyway. Why should it be surprised that my family was crazy? But they were also loving and fun and interesting people. I didn't see the loving, fun, and interesting because I'm self-centered by nature, okay? By nature, I look for what's wrong, and I focus on that. I heard a speaker this past year that I just said something really simple and funny, but I'd never heard in 34 years in Alcoholics Anonymous. He said, you can boil the entire 12 steps down to 3 words. It ain't them. Boy, I thought, isn't that powerful? Because all my life, it's been their fault. It's been my family's fault. It's been the teacher's fault. It's been the principal's fault. It's been my boss's fault. It's been my girlfriend's fault. It's been my woman's fault. It's been the police's fault. It ain't them. But I didn't connect with my family when I was a kid. I was unhappy. I felt disconnected. When I read those words in the doctor's opinion, restless, irritable, and discontented, boy, those are 3 words that just resonate with me. And I always have from the first time that I read them. But I was disconnected. I didn't really fit at home. I went to private schools. Starting in kindergarten, it was a very nice, highly thought of private school, walking distance to my house. And I grew up in Tampa, Florida, by the way. And I lived in South Tampa in a very nice, neighborhood, upper middle class. Walked to a private school every day. Didn't fit in that private school. I didn't fit with the smart kids, even though I was a smart kid. I didn't fit with the jocks, even though I was athletic and good at sports and liked to play sports. I was raised in church. I relate a lot to Dr. Bob, who in his story in the Big Book talks about an overabundance of, church education. We went to church on every Sunday. We went to Sunday school and big church, Some of y'all know the difference between Sunday school and big church. Sometimes Mom would say, okay, we're just going to Sunday school. We'd be like, no, big church. I sang in the choir at church. I was in the youth group at church. I went to confirmation classes and was reconfirmed at the age of 13 at church. And my mother, so I was doing all that as a kid. And my mother said, when you're 13, you're a man. which she didn't know was going to be probably more like 39 for this guy. When you're 13, you're a man. You can make your own decision once you're reconfirmed about going to church on Sundays, And she had, because I had complained and bitched about church, I don't want to go. And at 13, so that was the thing. She started at a young age. When you get to be 13, you can make your own decision. And I got reconfirmed at 13 in our church, and I never darkened the doors of a church after that on Sunday morning. I slept in every Sunday morning, almost from that day to this. And so I didn't have much of a spiritual. I never found a spiritual thing. I didn't fit with those church kids. I didn't fit anywhere. And maybe this is not a coincidence, because also at the age of 13, I found out where I fit. And where I fit was with anybody drinking Mickey's Mean Green malt liquor. And I went out with the kids in the neighborhood, 3 older boys in the neighborhood. I was the youngest. One of them was 16 because he had a car. And so he had a car, so let's drink and drive. So we went out and got 8 quarts of Mickey's Mean Green malt liquor for the 4 boys. And we drank 2 quarts each. And about halfway through that first quart, I discovered that my problem was an alcohol deficiency. And if I simply had this little bit of alcohol in me, look, here's how my brain operates, always has, still does today when I'm not spiritually plugged in, and I'll get to that, because I believe I still have every character defect that I've ever had. It's just when I'm spiritually plugged in and getting out of myself, those things do not plague me in the same way. When there's a flow of spirit through my life, those things do not plague me in the same way. But here's how my mind works. Okay, I'm hanging out with y'all, and somebody says something. And my brain says, you should say this. That goes with that, and it's funny. And then another part of my fear says, don't say that. My ego says, you're going to look stupid saying that. It's not going to be funny. No one's going to laugh. And then the other part of my brain says, yeah, it is. It's perfect. It's funny. Say it. It's going to go ahead and say it. And no, don't say it. You're going to look like a jackass. Now 20 seconds have gone by, and I say it. And it no longer fits in any way with what's going on. Okay? Y'all can relate to that. I've always been an overthinker and an underactor. Okay? And in Alcoholics Anonymous, what I've really learned is to take action that's guided by someone besides me and think less. Right? Think less, feel less, act more. That's kind of been the recipe. But anyway, that's the exact opposite of what I just described, and that's the only thing that I ever knew. I didn't have a program. And so when I drink, I say exactly what I think right when it happens. And usually it is funny, because I'm a funny, goofy person, okay? I mean, this jacket kind of tells you that, right? I'm an eccentric and a weirdo and a goofy, artsy kind of guy, okay? And I think things that I think are funny and that you guys I know think are funny, but I can't say them at the office, okay? When I'm talking with those people, look, I'm 34 years sober. I work with doctors and scientists and, and professional people. And the discussions that we have around the water cooler, for me, are an exercise in restraint, okay? Because I cannot say what I mean. I do a prison meeting every Tuesday night. And I'm more comfortable, honestly, with those men who are in prison for many years and can talk openly and clearly and without any editing, okay, than I can with the doctors and the lawyers and the nurses that I deal with, okay? This is why one alcoholic can help another alcoholic like nobody else can. Because there's a thing that happens when we talk honestly. Several people have already mentioned this about this weekend, about the honesty that takes place, and the power of that, the openness and the transparency of that, which is why in our stories, as Bill says in the big book, we almost relive the horrors of the past, because by doing so, we make it possible for someone else to see there might be hope for their situation, right? And this is a powerful, powerful deal. So anyway, alcohol freed me up in a way that I did not know I could be free. And that first night, 13 years old, drank 2 quarts of Mickey's, went to the movies, went and saw Eddie Murphy, 48 Hours or whatever it was, and laughed harder than I had ever laughed. Right? I mean, Eddie Murphy's funny anyway, but Eddie Murphy, 13 years old, on 2 quarts of Mickey's Mean Green malt liquor for a budding alcoholic, flawless. Okay? And I blacked out somewhere in that movie. And the last conscious memory that I had was, hey, I elbowed my buddy and said, watch this. And I leaned back in my chair unzipped my fly and urinated over the seat in front of me. You know, the golden arches, right, over the seat in front of me, which he thought was hysterical, and I thought was hysterical. My friends thought was hysterical, but the rest of the movie-going public was not impressed. And there was an uproar, and I just vaguely remember us having to get up and rush out of the side door of the theater and run through the parking lot laughing and zipping up my fly, and that was the funniest thing ever. And then I don't remember anything else. But what happened, what I was told later happened, was we got home to my friend's house where I was spending the night out, and I threw up all over his parents' living room, all over his bedroom, which led to discovery of what we'd been doing, which led to the other parents being informed of what we'd done, and everybody hating me. And all of the parents being disgusted, me being grounded for like a month, or every privilege that I had taken away, like no more Atari 2600 for you. You know, you're dating yourself if you laughed at that bit. So I was in a lot of trouble. But my thought the next morning, and I was very hungover, very, very ill, but my thought was, that was the greatest night of my life. That was the greatest night of my life, and I cannot wait to do it again. And whatever this price is that I'm paying is well worth it for the effect produced by alcohol. You know, and as it says in the doctor's opinion, I drink for the effect. The effect is elusive, and it's injurious, and I can't differentiate the true from the false, and by God, I'm going for it. And I'm 13 years old, so I'm not drinking every day or anything like that, but I'm drinking every weekend. Stolen booze. Okay, upper middle class family, upper middle class neighborhood, tons of liquor cabinets. Okay, my friends' parents had liquor cabinets, and so everybody would, you know, okay, look, I got like 12 ounces of Jack Daniels. Okay, I got 12 ounces of Cream de Menthe. I got 12 ounces of gin. Pour it all together. You know, put it in a jar, just go out in the woods, pass it around, take a big slug, and say something like, this cloudy, nasty, man, that's smooth. You know, pass it on to the next guy. And just got drunk every weekend. And then, you know, started mixing in some midweek drunks, you know. Started mixing in some pills and some weed. Oh, there were a lot of moms with mom's little helper pills, you know, in the you know. I knew I was getting sober when I got to a few years sober, and I stopped going through people's medicine cabinets when I would use your bathroom, because that was a big hobby of mine. Some of y'all had that hobby too. So anyway, I'm popping pills, I'm smoking weed, I'm drinking. I get to high school, and I was going to Tampa Prep. Tampa Prep is like the premier private school for college-bound kids in the city of Tampa. Like the mayor of Tampa's kids go there. You know, all the doctors and lawyers' kids went there. And because of that school, there was a lot of alcohol and drugs going on in that school, you know. All the parents' pills ended up at that school. So anyway, one day, about 4 or 5 months into high school, 9th grade, a bunch of us go out at lunch and get hammered. And one of the lightweights, you know, overdosed or something, you know, had a seizure, threw up on himself, and then narked on everybody, and so we all got kicked out. Bad luck. But I thought it was like a badge of honor. I was a skate rat by this point. Any skate rats out there? Ex-skate rats, you know? I was like heavy metal skate rat, punk rock guy. So, you know, it was like, it was a badge of honor. I got kicked out of Tampa Prep. You know, now I'm going to the degenerate high school, which is where I went with all my degenerate friends, which is where I wanted to be anyway, by the way. You know, my parents had great lofty goals for me, and I had the IQ scores to make those lofty goals seem attainable. I just didn't have the desire. I just wanted to drink and get loaded, and that was my whole deal, you know, drink and get loaded. So 16 years old, I'm in the degenerate high school, and for the next 3 years of that degenerate high school, I just drank and got loaded. You know, I completed 3 1/2 years of high school with a 1.0 GPA. I failed typing 3 semesters in a row because it was first period, and I would be hammered trying to type, you know, and laughing about click, 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 you know, but this is like, you know, mid-'80s now, you know, so it's these old electric typewriters. Click, 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 ha, ha, ha. And used to drop acid in school, you know. Spanish was always interesting. Anyway, in my second junior year of high school, by the way, I went to summer school every summer. Every single summer I had to go to summer school and make up whatever it was. And then there was so much to make up after a year or two, I had to go to both summer school and summer night school. And my wife always laughs at that because she's like, I didn't even know there was summer night school, you know? That's like for the really epic degenerates. And so my second junior year, I'm like 50 pounds overweight. I might have this really long blonde hair. I'm wearing nothing but black jeans, black Slayer shirt, or maybe Metallica, Death Angel, some of this really, high-end art. And I'm just kind of a mess, and I'm just living to drink every day. And I finally decided to quit high school. And the way I decided to quit high school was to tell the dean of students, the dean of the boys, Dean Otero. I told Dean Otero off in front of a bunch of my degenerate friends. And really, it was because they were there. It was because I knew I wanted to quit. And I was just like, yo, man, F you. I don't need your damn school. I'm out of here. I'm taking my GED. And he literally grabbed me by the scruff of the neck and marched me to the office and made me sign those papers. Because I was a thorn in his side. I was a pain in the ass to authority, and I was a pain in the ass to anybody who cared or any organization that was going on around me. One of my sponsors helped me to see this, that all of my life there have been meetings going on around me. And the subject of those meetings were, what are we going to do about John? And the meetings happened in school, and they happened with my parents, and they happened with family, and they happened in church, and they happened in Sunday school, and they happened in high school. And then later the police had those discussions, right? If you've been in jail, or arrested, somewhere a bunch of cops and, lawyers and judges were saying, what are we going to do about John? But I'm not hurting anybody, right? I'm not hurting anybody. If everyone would leave me alone, it's them, right? That's my whole philosophy. So that's how I'm living my life, and I dropped out of high school. Now my parents had got divorced. I was living with my father. I was living with my father because the psychiatrist that I'd been seeing said I needed a strong male role model. After I got kicked out of that nice school in 9th grade, there wasn't one available. Okay, so I had to go live with my father. Now, my father, that was a joke. My father actually is a pretty good role model. My father was a Marine. I know we got some jarheads in the room. I've seen a couple of them. He was a self-made man. My father came from nothing, went to the Marine Corps, 4 years in Korea, fought, killed Chinese people. He loved to talk about, I used to kill Chinese people, and fought in Korea, and that was his deal. He'd get drunk and want to tell you about all the Chinese people he killed. Fought in Korea, came home, GI Bill, college, medical school, private practice, started a business that grew that business to 500 employees. I mean, literally self-started guy. Came from nothing, got it together, pulled up his bootstraps, and achieved. And he couldn't understand how he ended up with a son like me. Actually, he ended up with 7 or 8 of us, but he had that drive that I'd never have had, that ambition that I never have had, at least until I got into Alcoholics Anonymous. Anyway, when I came home and it reported that I had dropped out of high school, my father just promptly kicked me out of the house, which was a really loving and good thing. And if he hadn't done that, God knows, it was actually turned out to be. I never liked my dad. When I finally got into Alcoholics Anonymous and did a 4-step, he was number 1 on my 4-step resentment list. Number 1, the old man. I know that's true for a lot of you guys. But he kicked me out, and I did what all tough guys do. I went and lived with my poor Al-Anon mother in her basement. And I drank in my mom's basement for about a year. Then she kicked me out. She got into Al-Anon. My mother got into Al-Anon is what happened. She got into Al-Anon, and she eased me out. She didn't kick me out. She actually eased me out. She eased me out into Gainesville, Florida, where she helped me get into an apartment, helped me get into a car, and said, I will help you out financially if you will go to the Santa Fe Junior College and maintain a C average and do something with your life. I thought that was a pretty good deal, So I did. I took her up on that. I got my little apartment in Gainesville, Florida, got my little 1980 Toyota Corolla station wagon, and started off to go to Santa Fe Junior College. And I got a job, and I was working, and I was out of the house, and I was completely and totally without any supervision. And for an alcoholic like me, no supervision means I'm going to just fall to pieces, which is what happened. It took me about a year in Gainesville, Florida. At the end of that year in Gainesville, Florida, hold on a second. Pull this out and make sure I keep track of the time. Okay, 2 hours left, good. All right. At the end of the year in Gainesville, Florida, this is sort of where it was at. I was living on the outskirts of town in a little 3-bedroom house with a roommate. We were a couple of 2-3 months behind on the rent, and we're getting ready to be evicted. This was in February and March, into March. I got sober in March, so through February and March of 1989. And it was very, very cold in North Florida that winter. It was freezing cold, and we had no gas and no heat and no electricity and no telephone and eventually no running water because all those things got turned off for non-payment of bills. And the reason for that is because all we did, this degenerate alcoholic Steve and myself, Steve was my lower companion, by the way. I'm a high school dropout. Steve dropped out in the 7th grade. All right, so I could always point at Steve and say, "Look at that piece of crap right there." You know? You need that guy if you're an alcoholic. You need that guy who's worse than you to kind of help you rationalize and delude yourself. I'm a big self-delusion guy. Okay, and this will prove it. So you can kind of BS yourself into thinking you're just like a young bohemian or something. I'm a heavy metal guy, man. I don't need the man and all his contrivances. I don't need society's little, I need your electricity, blah, blah. I got candles, And we lived by candlelight at night in that house, or stolen flashlight batteries. But when the water gets turned off and you can't shower or brush your teeth or flush your toilet anymore, that kind of slashes through a lot of the BS, right? And when you have no water, you can't flush your toilet. But the need to use the toilet still exists. So you're going to use it. So we would use the toilet all day. We'd pee and poo in the toilet, and it would just sit there and stink the house. The whole house just smelled like a rest area, bathroom, on I-75 in South Georgia. And, but, thank you, man. Thank you. I appreciate that. Vodka. But, clever guy that I am, I figured out that at night, when it got dark, I could go in the next door neighbor's yard and get their garden hose, and they had a 50-foot hose. I'd run it across the fence into our yard through the little bathroom window, fill the tank, and flush it. Get a couple of good flushes in every night. Now that's sick. That's sick living, right? That's just pathetic living. God's honest truth. At the time, my thought was, man, a lot of guys couldn't even come up with a plan to handle this, right? Like I'm an alcoholic MacGyver, I'm like I'm a problem solver, man. I'm a survivor. I'm a guy. I'm gritty, I'm able to get it done. There's a line that I love so much in the doctor's opinion. It says the alcoholic cannot at certain times differentiate the true from the false. And his alcoholic life seems the only normal one. I had not read that line at that time, but that's where I was at. I can't tell the truth from the false in my life. I can't. It doesn't say I don't know right from wrong or good from bad, because I've done a lot of thievery in my life. Every time I stole something, I knew it was wrong. I knew I was doing wrong. I'm not a sociopath, but I am capable of self-delusion to the most ridiculous level. And any of you who've been sober for a long time, just think back to some of the ideas that you had in your first year of sobriety. Some of those good ideas. Boy, newcomers, we know y'all got a lot of good ideas because we've had them. We have had some good ideas that we look back on now and just cringe, So anyway, God, when I look down, it really gets louder. So about this time, my Al-Anon mother has been dropping hints about rehab. She would drop hints about rehab. And if you ever want to talk about rehab, and your brother went to rehab and he's done well and, blah, blah, blah. So I ended up taking her up on her offer of rehab. Not because I thought I was an alcoholic. I did not think I was an alcoholic. or a drug addict. I did a lot of alcohol, a lot of drugs. I didn't think I was either one of those things. But I thought that I was mentally ill because I knew I had a lot of potential. How many of you guys in here have been told all your lives that you just got a ton of potential? I've been told that all my life. I have a ton of potential. I was IQ tested at like the age of 5 and found to be exceptionally high IQ. And then I've been in extra special classes and enrichment stuff and summer programs, and I've done all this stuff. Told about my potential. And then I had a psychiatrist. I've been seeing psychiatrists since I was 9, by the way. Because when you have a kid as screwed up as I was as a young man, and you come from a family that has a little bit of money, you just get to see a lot of professionals. You know, they fix this kid, you know. And so I've been seeing shrinks and psychiatrists and counselors of one type or another. And I had this one after that. I got kicked out of that high school. And I went through the whole 6-week psychological battery, you know, with the Rorschach stuff and the, you know, the physical and the mental and the spiritual. And you have the pictures and you draw the stories based on the picture, what's in the picture, and, you know, and all the different stuff, all the MMPI stuff. And at the end of it all, I had this big meeting with my mother and father and my stepmother and stepfather. And my mother in that meeting said, I want you to tell me if this kid's an alcoholic or a drug addict. And the doctor said, and this doctor was a pretty renowned doctor. I looked him up later. He was the former president of the American Psychological Foundation or something. And he said, absolutely not. He said, absolutely not. He does not have the mind of an alcoholic, for sure. I could have kissed that man. And the long and the short of it was this. My diagnosis was I have this rare, untreatable mental condition called mixed cerebral dominance. Okay? It sounds like bullshit. It's actually a real condition. I've looked it up. I do not have this condition. Most people have this. It's a corpus callosum, right side, left side thing, you know, where you're not right-brained or left-brained. You know, you're kind of back and forth and blah, blah, blah. Most people who have it have profound dyslexia, which I do not have. But I remembered that. I remembered that diagnosis. And I held on to it. And I cradled it to my breast like a newborn infant. And I would tell anybody who cared to listen about the hopeless, untreatable, and rare mental condition that I suffered from. And I came into Alcoholics Anonymous with that. So I come to rehab, and I did not go. I went because I thought maybe they could sort out my hoo-hoo, and then I would be able to drink successfully. So I come to rehab, Ridgeview Institute. Go to Ridgeview Institute, 1989. And I go in there, and they put me on the adolescent unit because they were like, you were way too immature to go on the adult unit. I was 19. And I should have been on the adult unit. They put me on the adolescent unit. So I'm on the adolescent unit for 4.5 months, which is really why they put me there, because once I'd signed that paper, then you can't sign yourself out of that. You know, it's adolescent unit. So I'm on the adolescent unit 4.5 months, and I mean, 6 groups a day, and we did all the things, and whatever the modus operandi of the late 80s, therapeutic approach to alcoholism and drug addiction was, I did. And I got out and I started going to AA. The miracle of recovery that happened for me did happen in that hospital. And here's what happened. Men and women came in there and told their stories 3-4 nights a week. They had a little speaker meeting deal. They bring in speakers from the outside. And men and women from AA and NA and CA and different programs would come in. And within about a month of listening to those men and women, my eyes were just open. For the first time ever, I connected with another group of human beings in a way that I now connect with you guys. That thing that happened to us, and it didn't matter that man, woman, gay, straight, black, white, didn't matter. All these people came in, I connected with every single one of them. And within a month or so, I just threw myself wholeheartedly into, this is my tribe. These are my people. I am in, I'm 100%. You guys, whatever it is you got, I'm going with it. I'm an alcoholic and I'm going with it. And I got out of the rehab and I did halfway house and 3/4 house and 13/16 house, and I did aftercare, and I did, the therapeutic thing. The whole first year was like therapeutic community of some kind or another, and then follow-up aftercare, and then I was in, individual therapy and group therapy going forward, and, and I really threw myself in, and once, as soon as I was able to, I was, as soon as I got a car and a job, I was at a meeting every night. 7 nights a week I was at a meeting. I was at Triangle, and I was at 8111, and I was at a few different groups around town. And I'm 20 years old now, and I'm out on my own recognizance, as it were. And this is this is like late 89, going into 90, and the rehabs are just disgorging. Just, scores of these teenage kids out of rehab into the AA community. And we just glummed together, like 100 or 200 of us, and we would just go and take over your meeting and drive you out of it and talk about drugs, especially if you asked us not to. We'd go to NABA. There used to be a sign on the wall at NABA. Singleness of purpose means only we're talking about alcohol problems related to alcohol. And I would coach up like 10 guys from the halfway house, and we would go to NABA, and we would introduce ourselves as alcohol addicts, just to piss off the old timers, right? Just to piss them off. Crazy. But I loved Alcoholics Anonymous. I really did. My love was tainted love. My love was weird love. It was disrespectful in many ways, but I did love Alcoholics Anonymous. And my life started to come together. That first year, I got into, I did all kind of odd jobs for a year, and then I got into college at Kennesaw Community College, which is what it was called back then. And I went to Kennesaw College, and I'm working full-time as a waiter, and I'm making more money and spending less. It's amazing how much less you spend when you're not drinking and drugging, right? I got money. I got a bank account. I got a bank account with money, positive money in it, I got a car, with a valid driver's license. I got a tag on my car with this year's number on it, I'm going to school. I'm going to AA meetings. I'm working. I have a life. I have friends. I have a community of fellow alcoholics around me, and things are great. And I didn't even believe. I was so in love with Alcoholics Anonymous. Excuse me. I didn't even believe that life could be that good. And it kept getting better. And my first semester at Kennesaw made straight A's. 3 classes, straight A's. First time that had ever happened in my life. I thought, holy cow, this is actually doable. And I didn't even break a sweat getting 3 A's. It's community college. It's not that hard. If you show up to every single class, you get a B, right? So if you actually then turn in assignments, you get an A, right? That's basically the deal. So I signed up for 3 more classes. Then I signed up for 3 more classes. And suddenly, a year and a half of college have gone by. I've got a 4.0 GPA, and I applied to Emory University and got accepted. And they didn't care that I had a high school, that had a GED, because I had 18 months of straight A's behind me. So now I transfer over to Emory. So now I'm at Emory. I'm still going to 7 meetings a week. I'm going to Emory University. I've cut my hair by this point, which it turned out all I ever needed to do to make my father happy was cut my hair. He became so happy. He was so proud of me that I was going to Emory and I had short hair. He just, here's the funny thing. I learned this. This is one of those hindsight things. Parents love to tell other parents how their kids are doing when they're doing well, right? Parents love to say, oh, our son got into, Auburn University. We're so happy. Our son got a scholarship to such and such a school. Parents love to say that. My parents never got that opportunity to say that. I took that from them. Actually, parents love to gift their kids stuff. I came from a family with enough money that when I turned 16, if I had straight A's and was like still playing ball and doing good, still on the wrestling team, my parents would have bought me a brand new car. And then they would love to tell their friends, I bought my kid who's straight A student, who's going to college, he's doing this, he's on the wrestling team, I bought him a brand new car. They love to tell their friends that. Not my parents. They didn't buy me a car because they knew I'd kill myself in a car. They were just waiting to be called to tell them that their kid, was dead in a drunk driving accident. So I took a lot of things unknowingly from my parents, is what I'm saying, in those years. Anyway, so my pop's now proud of me, my mom's proud. Everyone's proud of me. This is a new experience for me. A bunch of people are proud of John. I'm sober, and I'm 2 years sober, and I'm going to AA 7 meetings a week. And I'm making more money than I've ever made in my life. I'm performing better in school. I'm actually a real college student, at a real university, not some rinky-dink university. Now I'm at Emory, baby, and I'm going to 7 meetings a week. I got a little apartment. I lived with Dr. David Gore for 6 months before he ran me out in favor of this woman that he totally shouldn't have. And I'm living in Virginia Highlands, and I got a 1991 model year car in 1991. Isn't that the definition of success? I had a model year for the current year that I was living in. Unheard of, right? So I got all this good stuff happening in my life, is what I'm saying. And I'm getting more sex than I've ever gotten, you know? It's really funny. I'm not a particularly good-looking guy. I've never a particularly good-looking guy, and I always tended to be overweight. But, you know, I'm sober. I'm not drinking. You know, I'm not destroying my body with a bunch of drugs. I'm working out a lot. I'm outdoors a lot. I'm playing tennis and racquetball and stuff like that. And I'm kind of got thin enough that basically you don't have to be good-looking. If you just kind of chew with your mouth closed and are reasonably polite, some women will just sleep with you. You know? So I'm getting more sex than I've ever got. I got a series of girlfriends. I'll come back to that if I have time, because it was chaos. In my first 3.5 years in Alcoholics Anonymous, I had 30 relationships. And they weren't one-night stands. I mean, they were relationships. They lasted between 7 days and 7 weeks. But I was monogamous. It was a relationship. And then it would explode, and I would move on to the next relationship. That was my pattern. Didn't see that pattern at all until I wrote an inventory, 3.5 years sober. So anyway, about 3 years in, things are not working. Things are not good on the inside. They're getting bad. They're getting gritty. The old timers used to say, and I believe this today, it's an inside job. It cannot be fixed with outside things. And that's all I had done. And I had done that unconsciously. Okay? Most of us do this, and we do it unconsciously. You know, if I get the right amount of money and the right amount of girls and the right amount of sex and the right amount of toys and the right guitar, you know, and the right amplifier and the right effects processing kit and the right amount of studio time and the right amount of grades, right address, right clothes, the guns, if I get in the gym and get the big guns, you know, all this outside stuff. And I just unconsciously, that's what I did. And about 3 years sober, it started to crash. I was getting very miserable. I was getting very depressed, and I didn't understand what was going on, because on the outside, things were better than they had ever been in my life. And on the inside, I'm getting depressed, I'm getting suicidal, I want to drink. I end up at this party about 3.5 years sober that I had zero business being at, okay? I'm a big, goofy, eccentric, artsy, kind of weirdo, kind of musician guy. A frat party at Emory University is not where I'm supposed to be. But I'm at one at this Lake Lanier Islands, you know, with all these Emory guys at this frat party, and they're just they got like 10 kegs, and they got bags of weed and ounces of coke, and I'm just sitting here watching these, and they don't even know what they're doing. These are like amateur party college guys, so they don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to do any of that stuff. So I was like, F it. I'm getting loaded. And I'm going to show these lightweights how to really do it. And I made the decision to drink. And in this moment of having made the decision to drink, 3.5 years sober, life better on the outside than it had ever been, worse on the inside than it had ever been. Walking down a hallway, instead of turning left, I turned right, and I went to the bathroom, and I got on my knees, and I said, because I had a minimal program. I had pick and chose, like cafeteria-style AA, which is not what works for me. And I had a spiritual thing. I would get on my knees and pray, you know, and I went to the bathroom, I got on my knees and said, God, get me out of this. Because I don't know what I need to do, but I know it's not with this. And I left that place, and I went home, and I asked this guy to sponsor me. Now, this guy that I asked to sponsor me, his name is Hamilton. I did not like this man. I thought he was way too serious about AA. Because he always talked about the big book, and he always talked about commitment, and he always talked about amends and inventory and prayer and meditation, and I got to go to Florida to make amends for something that happened 25 years ago. And I just thought, this guy, I really took to heart that expression, I wear this program like a loose garment. Like, this guy is wearing it like a very tight garment, you know. That's what it looked like to me. But there was some quality that this man had of serenity, of repose, of connectedness. You know, he was at peace with what he was doing. And I heard his story. He was crazy as a shithouse rat. Excuse my French. He was as crazy as I was. And he was not that way anymore. So I asked this guy to sponsor me, and he said, sure, I'll sponsor you. And we started going through the steps. And actually, funny coincidence. So my first real, thorough, fourth and fifth step took place 30 years ago this weekend at The Rock. It was the snowstorm year for any of you guys who've been around all since that time. It started snowing on Saturday morning. It snowed like 10 inches in like 5 hours, and everybody left. And the power went out, and everybody left. And my sponsor and I went to Eatonton. There's a little cafe that still had power on, and we sat there for like 5 hours, and we did my fifth step, or we finished doing it. And then we came back, and we did a candlelight rock with like 35 guys the rest of the weekend. And I had a profound experience in that fifth step. And here's what it was. I went into that fifth step not believing the line in the big book that says, selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of my problem. That I'm driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. Self-centeredness is my problem, and I'm driven by all these character defects. I don't buy that. Or if I don't think I consciously said I don't buy it. I would never have consciously said that to myself. It just didn't connect with me. By the time I had done that first inventory with the help of a good sponsor, I was clear. Every resentment I had a whole bunch of self-centeredness and fear and misbehavior tied up with. Yes, maybe somebody in some instances had done harm to me, but in almost every case I could see where either I had set the ball rolling or had allowed this one incident in our relationship to define everything about our relationship forever, right? And then mistreated that person and used your bad behavior as an excuse for my bad behavior. And I've been doing that my whole life. And I just had this, my eyes were open for the first time to some of this stuff, man. And I had a spiritual awakening. And we weren't even at the 12th step yet, and I'd already had a spiritual awakening. You know, and we were going to a big book study. His sponsor was a guy named Dennis Sanfilippo. And many of you who've been here a while will remember Dennis Sanfilippo. He's been dead a really long time. Died 2004. But he became my sponsor later for many years. And Dennis had a big book study in his basement. And we would sit there like 30 guys in Dennis's basement over on Lawrenceville Highway. 30 alcoholics. Every one of them was a smoker. Okay, myself included. And we would smoke a cigarette every 15 minutes during a 90-minute or 2-hour big book study. All right, and 30 guys in there, and we had one of those industrial 200-cup coffee pots. And so we all had a cup of coffee and 2 cigarettes, you know. And we would listen to the Joe and Charlie Big Book workshop tapes, and then we would pause the tapes and we would read through the book up to that point. And then when we got to a step, we would go get with our sponsors and work that step, and we would come back to the group and tell us about how our step work went. And if we had amends that we'd tell people, I'm getting ready to go off and make this amends, that we'd hear these amends stories. People would come back and make their amends and tell us the stories of it. And in 6 months, we went through the 12 steps. And then we sat down and started doing it again, right? And so between, let's see, it was about 3.5 years sober when Ham became my sponsor. And because The Rock would have been that 1993. So in about 9 months, worked the 12 steps. And it changed my life. It just changed my life, and I never looked back since that day to this. And it's funny to me to think that I was this close to deciding to drink. I mean, I was as close. I had made the decision to drink, and I just got slightly diverted out of fear, which is sanity, you know, according to the big book. If I'm afraid of a drink, I'm sane, right? When I'm not afraid of a drink, I'm insane, because I should be afraid based on my history. Anyway, kind of kickstarted everything again for me, you know? I was, young, still very crazy, still just burdened with character defects. You know what I learned too in this process, and I've gone through the steps quite a number of times since then, it's really, what really makes my life unmanageable is my character defects, you know? If you live with untreated character defects like I have, you start having strained relations with the people around you. You start having judgments over people around you and the government, you know, and the neighbor, you know, and the cops, and the IRS, you know. start getting paranoid about the girl that you're dating and why didn't she sit kind of near that guy 3 meetings in a row? What's going on there? You know, there's fear and paranoia and all this bullshit. This is what I live with. And if I'm not treating my alcoholism with a spiritual program of action, I'm reverting to that. Okay, it doesn't say this anywhere in the literature, guys, that this is what I believe. I'm either consciously doing God's will or I'm unconsciously going to do my own. I'm either consciously doing God's will or I'm just unconsciously drifting back to that restless, irritable, and discontent place. And when you live with character defects like that, I become restless, irritable, discontent. I need a drink. I have an alcohol deficiency again, and a drink is going to treat that. So I have my sobriety from that day to this has been this series of relearning and relearning and relearning that lesson. Right? So, but like for the most part, it's been an upward trajectory. That's the good news. Once you get on the path, it'll be an upward trajectory, man. There's going to be some, up and down. We're going to crash and burn sometimes. But we always bounce back if we have a program of action, And thank God I've had a series of great sponsors, a series of great home groups, and just a love of Alcoholics Anonymous that has sustained me. So in a very short period of time, I've rediscovered, I told you, I've always loved Alcoholics Anonymous from that early treatment center experience. All right, but I rediscovered that love in a big way. And it was much more purposeful now. It was much more like, hey, I'm a link in the chain. I get to carry the message. I get to be I get to be a guy who can help another guy have this experience that I have had. That is a really noble purpose. And that's become the center for me. Okay, so I'm enthusiastic. I'm an AA cheerleader. I'm kick-ass. Let's go, man. Let's do this. Let's go to conventions. Let's go to the Rock. Let's travel. Let's go to the Southeast Regional Convention. Let's go to the state convention. Let's go to the Atlanta Roundup. Let's go to the international convention. So we started doing that kind of stuff. About this time, I'm just doing AA now. It's my primary purpose. I have completely given myself to the simple program. At this point, this is about 4.5 years in. I told you guys. So this is a funny thing. I don't know if I have time to tell these stories, but this is a funny thing. I had 30 relationships in my first 3.5 years in Alcoholics Anonymous. Like I said, 30 relationships. I worked the 12 steps. I didn't work them perfectly. I didn't work them finally. I didn't work them as thoroughly as I might have, but I worked them. And I continued to work them. Since then, I've had 2 relationships. I've had 2. The first one was 18 months with this little non-alcoholic girl that I met somewhere, a friend of a friend. And she was so sweet and good. And she was like from a Catholic family. And she was totally normal. And in the end, I broke up with her after 18 months. I never break up with girls. I always get in a big fight and have them dump me. Okay? I never break up with girls. I broke up with this girl because I knew I didn't want to marry her. She was too freaking normal. Okay? And I know I was right because that girl is a state of Georgia appellate judge today. Did you see me being married to a non-alcoholic judge? I don't think anyone here, I know I can't. Okay? I was doing service work. I was on the International Young People's Committee in 1993 and 4. And I was doing service work. I drove to Columbus to bring a bunch of flyers to the young people's dance. There used to be dances every weekend in Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't know what's happened to the younger generation, but we used to get down. And, right? Get down, get down. I drove to Columbus, Georgia to bring a bunch of flyers and make announcements at this young people's convention, like, some local thing. And at the dance, I met a little girl in Alcoholics Anonymous, and we hit it off. And a year later, she had moved to Atlanta, and we hit it off again. We had not slept together, by the way. We just hit it off. We just had a connection, had chemistry. Well, if we don't get divorced between now and May, we'll be married 27 years. So, right? 30 relationships in 3 years to 2 relationships in 34 years. I didn't put that together, by the way, until I had about 20 years sober. That occurred to me one day in talking to my sponsor, There's a line in our book that says, when we look back, we'll see that God's given us everything, But it says when we look back. I don't get to see this stuff in real time. I'm usually the last to know what's going on, but God's will gets done. I just got to have faith in the process. So, whatever, met this little gal in Alcoholics Anonymous. We got married. I got a degree in biology. from Emory, thinking I was going to go to medical school. I decided the last thing in the world I wanted to do was go to medical school. I'm not really cut out to be a physician. So your options are kind of slim if you have a degree in biology and are not going to medical school. You can be a dentist, which I didn't want to be, or you can be a scientist. So I decided to apply to a bunch of graduate programs and be a scientist, and eventually got accepted to Yale University. And so my new fiance and I moved to New Haven, Connecticut to attend Yale University, which, by the way, I was completely terrified once I got accepted into, because I have imposter syndrome. Every alcoholic has imposter syndrome. I just know, it's all gone great up to now, but the other shoe's going to fall. They're going to realize that this GED asshole somehow got into Yale, and and they're going to kick me out. So that didn't happen. I did almost get kicked out. Actually, I did almost get kicked out after 3 years, or 2 years, because of my big fat mouth. Because remember I was telling you earlier, I have to regulate myself, man. I got to edit myself, And sometimes if I don't edit myself, I get kicked out of places for the things that I say. And one day I just wasn't spiritually fit enough, and I said some stuff I shouldn't have said. And my boss, the guy who became my boss for like 7 years, threw me out with a lot of F-bombs publicly in front of a bunch of people and said, never come back. And that was a low, low day. Part of me was saying, see, just a matter of time. You can't do anything right. You're going to screw it up, And then right on the heels of that came, we promptly make amends when we've made a mistake. And I went and saw that guy, and I made an amends to him. And I said, I'm perfectly happy to leave and never come back if that's what you really want. But I really want to stay. And I was wrong, and I'm an idiot, and I have a history of putting my foot in my mouth. And I'll try to do better. And he said, 100% I want you to stay. I overreacted and blah, blah, blah. And that guy stayed my boss for the next 7 years. And matter of fact, he and I are going to see the Atlanta Braves play the Boston Red Sox at Fenway Park on July 25th this year. We're still tight, man. We're tight enough to do that. So that's kind of a pretty cool deal. So anyway, graduate school, we moved to Connecticut. I was saying this a little bit earlier, that I don't know if you guys have had the experience that I have. Every time I've ever moved from one state to another in Alcoholics Anonymous, wherever I've moved, the AA sucks. Right? I don't have a judgment problem. It's just an empirical fact. This is not as good as AA in Georgia. Right? And we went to 90 meetings in 90 days because we're dedicated, we're diligent, we're trying to connect, and we're not having a very good experience, and we don't really like the meetings. And then someone says, hey, you guys need to go to the state convention. State convention's coming up next month. Oh, great, yes, of course, we love conventions. By the way, if you're not convention goers, become convention goers. Things happen at conventions and retreats and workshops that happen at no place else in Alcoholics Anonymous. That's why people like me become fanatics about it. So we go to the state convention in Connecticut, and we're like, okay, we're kind of just being dutiful, moving our feet AA members, right? I've had good sponsors. I've been trained to move my feet. No matter how I feel, no matter what I think, just shut up and move your feet, get in the car, we're going, right? Go to the convention, go to the thing, go to the GSR meeting. So we go to the convention, and who is the Saturday night speaker? Bill freaking Sanders is the Saturday night speaker at the Connecticut State Convention in 1995. And so we go see Bill, and I knew Bill really well. And he gives us a big hug, and he sits us down, and he says, so tell me about Connecticut. Tell me about your integration to AA. Oh, Bill, AA really sucks here. It's not like back home. And Bill goes, oh, hold on a second. I have a phone number here for someone you just have to meet. And Bill gave us a phone number for this guy, Carl, that he had met, who lived in Connecticut and was also bitching about the AA in Connecticut. And he put us together, and we ended up starting a home group up there. We fell in with this guy, Carl, and a bunch of his sponsees, and we started this group up there. And within about 3 years, that group was 150 people. And it was my first real experience with a Three Legacies home group, where we had a group that was united around our common primary purpose, which is to carry the message the alcoholic still suffers. And what that looked like in that group was we had twice a week, we did meetings at Connecticut Valley Hospital, which is a big state psychiatric and drug and alcohol treatment hospital. And then once a week, we did a treatment at Cheshire Prison, which is a big state prison up there. And so the group would take meetings, We wouldn't wait for somebody else to, we reached out to these institutions and started these meetings. And so 10 or 15 of us would go from the group to the Connecticut Valley Hospital and talk to all the knuckleheads down there. And then we'd go to the prison and talk to all the knuckleheads. And when the knuckleheads got out of jail or prison or Connecticut Valley Hospital, the only group they knew was the Primary Purpose Group of Middletown, Connecticut. And that group's still there today. It's a couple hundred strong. They split off another group over in like Marlborough, Connecticut. It's a couple hundred strong. So it's amazing. There's a line in our book about, a fellowship will grow up around you. You just show up and do active. And that's 100% how AA has grown. Right? Every AA group that exists in the United States of America today started because one jerk-off called New York and said, I hear you have a solution for alcoholism, and they mailed him a big book and said, yeah, just read this book and do what it says. Can you imagine? Just me, no meetings, no sponsorship, no one to buy me coffee at Denny's. I'm just supposed to read this book, take these steps, do my 5th step with the local rabbi or priest or minister, go find someone to help at the local psych hospital. That's how it all got started. Anyway, this old timer had kind of pushed that whole agenda. So we said, yeah, great, let's do it. So, and about the time that we're happy, joyous, and free in that new setting, it's time to move again. And my boss, who was English, got called home to England to set up a lab. For scientists, it's a really big deal to be given a ton of research money. That's what scientists live for, research money. So here's 10 million in research money. Okay, I'm coming. Right? So he goes to London, and he made it possible for us to move to London. So we moved ourselves, and by this time we had a little bitty 6-month-old baby, and our first son was born, and we all moved to London, England. So now we're living in London, England, and guess what? The AA sucked. So I'm calling home. The AA sucks here. And they don't drink coffee, just tea. Which is true. They had a tea commitment in the one group we went to. The tea commitment was you had this big, about 2-gallon teapot with a big spout on it, and you walked around the meeting, or somebody walked around the meeting, during the meeting while the speaker was talking. More tea, more tea, more tea, more tea, It's very different, very different. It wasn't bad, it was just different. So we ended up starting a group there. That group's still going on. The Primary Purpose Group of Mottingham. That's where we lived. Mottingham, southeast London, SC9. Gov Mottingham. Anyway, we were there 4 years, and our second child was born there. And we moved back home, and couldn't wait to get back home because we were going back to Georgia, where AA was great. Got back to Georgia. AA sucked here. It's not them, right? Who's got the problem?
I do.
I got the problem, right? Anyway, so I'm going to wind up here. I need to kind of finish up. Got a few minutes. I want to tell a story. So, my life has been amazing in Alcoholics Anonymous. I hope I painted a picture of a guy who's had a good experience in Alcoholics Anonymous. But it's not like you get sober and then life is just easy and everything happens. It rains and pours and snows and on the good and the bad, on the righteous and the unrighteous, on the just and the unjust, right? And sometimes bad stuff just happens. And so we had 2 little boys. We wanted a little girl. We were trying forever to have a little girl. My wife had a couple of miscarriages. And then finally she gets pregnant. And yes, amen, brother, it's a girl. We are so excited. And she was 9 months pregnant, and we went to the hospital for an ultrasound because she hadn't started her labor yet. They wanted to just do a precautionary ultrasound. And they discovered that my baby girl had a stroke in the womb and had a huge brain injury. And it was like, bam, this has happened. Bam, you have to drive to the hospital right now for an emergency C-section. Don't go home, don't stop, go there. The neonatal surgeons are on, everyone's on call, they're going to be there, blah, blah, blah. It's like gut punch, right? We drive to the hospital, I call my sponsor, she calls her sponsor on the way to the hospital. We get to the hospital, they do emergency C-section, they take the baby out, take the baby across the street to the NICU hospital. Okay, my wife's in recovery from her surgery. Finally, I get a chance to answer the phone, and it's my sponsor, and he says, tell me what's going on. I said, here's what's going on. I'm crying, I'm panicking. I'm in the worst possible state that any parent could be in. I'm like, I don't know. Kathy's in the hospital, and the baby's across the street, and the boys are at home, and someone's got to pick them up from school. And he's like, shut up, and I'm going to put you on the phone with Barbara. That's his wife, Barbara. The Al-Anon, because Al-Anons are way better organizers, especially in a crisis. So Barbara gets on the phone with me, and she launches a chain reaction. And 50 people stopped what they were doing and came to the hospital and went to my house and got the kids. And, for the next week while we were in the hospital, she was recovering and the baby was in the other hospital. And I'm having to run back and forth. I mean, people came to our house. AA showed up for us without anybody. I never asked for anybody to show up. They just showed up. Okay? They showed up and they cleaned my house and mowed my lawn. I see your hedges need doing, and cooked casseroles and ready-made meals and blah, 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 and all this. Man, 5 years later, I was cleaning out my basement chest freezer, and there were still 16 Al-Anon casseroles frozen in that chest freezer. Anyway, and, we got through it, and my little girl I have a lovely 18-year-old daughter today. She is a special needs child. She has a pretty profound brain injury, and she will never live independently. But she is loving and sweet, and she is just exactly the way God made her, and she's fine. Meanwhile, I have two normally developing boys who are 23 and 25 who are trying to qualify for this deal, And my wife and I often joke, couldn't we have had 3 special needs child, Because that's how much easier she has been for us. So you just never know what's in store for you when things happen. So anyway, the story I want to tell is about 6 months after my daughter was born. Things had settled down. And a lot of you will remember M. M. Pendroy. We can use his last name because he's now in the great meeting in the sky. Well, M and I had the same sponsor, Dennis. Actually, this time Dennis was not my sponsor because I had moved on, but I was still hanging out with those guys all the time. And we had a big book study at Dennis's house on a Wednesday night because that meeting went for like 35 years in Dennis's house until he died. And so anyway, M was the newcomer at this time. M was pretty new. He was like in his first, year. But, anyone who knows M knows M picked up a whole bucket full of white chips over the years before he finally got it. And M was, M, man. And he was in the meeting one night, and we were reading We Agnostics, and we were talking about God. And, M was saying, oh, man, I hate the way they capitalize God in all this literature, man. It's like capital G, it should be lowercase g. And it's a pretty good impression of M. M had this thing. His name was lowercase m. Capitalization was a big deal to M. Anyway, unbeknownst to me, after that meeting, he and Dennis had sat down, and Dennis has said, look, you're going to stop arguing about spiritual matters, and you're just going to take action. And the very first action I want you to take is to start praying for somebody besides yourself. And M comes to me, my daughter's 6 months old, and he says, I want you to understand something about your daughter, Mackenzie. And it kind of shocked me because I was like, what the hell is M going to talk to me about my 6-month-old special need baby girl? And he says, it's because of Mackenzie that I believe in God. Right? That was kind of my reaction. It's like, M, what are you talking about? He says, well, Dennis had this ultimatum. He had this come to Jesus talk with me, and he said, you're going to start praying for somebody besides yourself, and you're going to shut up in the meeting about this God stuff and just take spiritual action. And you're going to pray for someone besides yourself. And M, this is what I love. M said to Dennis, there's not one MFer on this planet who's worthy of my prayers. Isn't that the most alcoholic thing ever? Isn't that just that not one person is worthy of a prayer from me? And he said, well, you think about it, because you're either going to do that or get another sponsor, is what Dennis told him. And he said, that was the night that Mackenzie was born. And I heard about all the difficulties y'all are going through. And I thought, there's a person. There's a person who's worthy of a prayer. A little girl who can't yet have done anything wrong. He said, so I started praying for Mackenzie. And this is killing me, right? As he's telling me this. I don't know jack shit about this. This is 6 months after my daughter's born. He says, so I started praying for Mackenzie that night. And I have said a prayer for her every single night for the last 6 months. And it's led to other things. And I'm over it. I'm over the difficulties that I had with a higher power, with God, spirituality. And it started with Mackenzie. So I just wanted you to know that. What do you say to that? I said, thanks. I hugged him. Thanks, man. Appreciate that. And M stayed sober till the day he died, 14, 15 years later. It's powerful stuff. And again, that line in the big book says, when we look back, we see that the things that come to us when we put ourselves into God's hands are better than anything we could have planned. And my whole sobriety, my whole problem has been unwillingness to put myself completely in God's hands. Whatever God is, whatever that means. I don't know what it means. You know? Now here's a funny follow-up to that. M stayed sober, and a few years later, he starts sponsoring my cousin. My cousin shows up at M's big book study. That kid's still sober. Circle thing, man. It's a circle thing that happens, that goes on. And I'm getting near the end of my time. I just want to leave you with one thought. There's that. Someone got a big book handy? Is there a big book over here? Someone got a big book handy? That's a prepared alcoholic right there, fellas. Just make sure I didn't pull the mic out here. So there's this thing, right at the end on page 164 of our book, right? The last little bit, of the instructions. Let me get to it here. Abandon yourself to God as you understand God. And I love this. I close with this for a long, long time in my talks. Admit your faults to Him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you shall surely meet some of us if you trudge the road of happy destiny. I love that. I think it's a really good way to end the talk. But the paragraph before, in our big book study, my home group, we just finished the big book and started back at the beginning a few months ago. And this jumped out at me. And maybe because I'm so fixated on that last bit that I kind of overlook, because I've read this a million times, but I've maybe overlooked it or given it less significance than it needed to. Since our book is meant to be suggested only, we realize we know only little. God will constantly describe more to you and to us. Ask Him, this is the line that jumped out at me. Ask Him in your morning meditation, what can you do each day for the man who is still sick? Man, that's a good meditation. What can I do each day for the man who's still sick? Because, guys, we're standing on the shoulders of giants. Men who are dead, who died before we got sober, meditated on what could they do to carry this message. What could they do to ensure that this life-sustaining message of Alcoholics Anonymous is still available? And they took action based on that. And action that we'll never see or be able to know about, but it still got taken on our behalf. And I just love that. I just love it. And then it says, the answers will come if your own house is in order, but you can't transmit something you haven't got. We'll give a little jive at you. Finish those amends, Do another inventory. Anyway, I appreciate y'all listening. Thanks for letting me share.